Welcome, everybody, to this episode of O365Eh. On today's episode, we have a special guest, Stephen Rose, on our podcast. So welcome, Stephen.
Howdy. How's everybody doing today?
We're doing great. And
Awesome.
of course, we affectionately know you with your time at Microsoft. I think you spent 15 years as an IT pro readiness role at Microsoft. And now you're an independent consultant, and you're helping companies modernize and prepare for AI, which is sort of topic of the day. So we have a bunch of great questions lined up in terms of what you do with companies in terms of Copilot and AI. But before we get to that, maybe I'll just turn it over. You give a little introduction for our audience.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. A lot of years at Microsoft leading readiness for Windows, Office, OneDrive, Teams, AI, managed the MVP programs for a lot of folks. And over the last almost 2 years now, since I started my own company, I travel around the world speaking. I work with a variety of customers. I'm working with Takeda, the pharmaceutical company. I'm working with Capital Group, one of the largest finance companies, and just finished a project where we took a client from Zoom and Slack to Teams and Copilot in about 90 days. That's in the graphic arts and web design area. So really working with a large variety of customers and really enjoying myself, which is, that's always the objective.
That's fantastic. And I'll kick it off with, I think a few of us have talked to you about you've, in the last year, have gone into many Copilot rollouts that weren't particularly successful at first. Maybe the company owned the licenses and just didn't utilize it, and then you've re-engaged and they've gotten more value out of it. So why don't you just walk us through sort of what the difference maker was in terms of them getting the value out of Copilot?
Sure. I think there were kind of three key things. So somebody says we want to go and leverage Copilot. There's really three key things. The first thing is the cost. I mean, it's $32 per user per month, prepaid for a year. That's a pretty large investment. So the first thing I recommend for a lot of folks is go to Teams Premium. At $7 to $8 a license, you get all the value of Copilot and Teams, doing the transcription, taking notes for you, doing meeting recaps, the thing that most people are generally seeing the most value from, and doing it at a much smaller cost, with a chance for you to look at things like security, governance, how people are using it, who's asking for more, and really set yourself up for success later. But the other two things are, number one, good Teams usage. Are people really using Teams? I walk into a lot of companies and say things like, look, no more attachments. Any emails that are more than a year old, we're going to archive them and we're going to take them out of Outlook, and any content that you have in SharePoint or OneDrive that's more than 3 years old, we're going to archive that. We're going to put it into Azure Cold Storage. Why? Because if you have all of this data, you ask Copilot a simple question and you have 8 versions of the same document that people shared via email with different information, or you have documents that represent the way you used to talk about your products and services, and that's different than the current, you're not going to get a good response from Copilot on that. So it really is quality Teams usage, maybe starting with Teams Premium to see the value, and doing what you've needed to do for a long time, which is go through all that data, clean that up, dedupe, and do all of that. At that point, you're in a much better position to have Copilot give you value and be able to give answers that work well for people.
That's interesting. That makes sense. And then, Dino, I think you had a follow-on question, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And about using premium, that's a really nice tip for the community for sure. How might you start to do some of the cost analysis to really get in, really figure out, is that $32? Because a lot of customers will ask today,
right,
what's my ROI on this? And that's a really difficult thing, I think, to kind of figure out.
I think at a higher level, before you even talk about ROI, is understanding what those expectations are going to be. The first conversation I have is, why do you want to use AI? Are you looking to reduce cost? Are you looking to do this? My definition for Copilot has been, it is a tool that removes redundant or repetitive work so that you can do the job that you were paid for at the level that you're paid for. Meaning, you reading through a long email thread is not a good value if you are a $70 hour executive. What is a good use of that time is reading the summary of it and saying, okay, here's what I want to do and here's how I want to follow up, or things along that line. And that's where Copilot brings value. How much value you're going to get out of it really depends on, how modernized is your workforce? Are you really using chat and Teams and using a cloud first approach? Because if you people that are still saying, yes, send me that file and do that in leadership, nobody below is going to continue to work that way. But then it is the great thing with Teams Premium is you'll really be able then to go into the Copilot admin console where you can see how people are using Copilot and start to see the pickup. Where do we want to do more training? And with Capital Group, we took a look at people saying, this is awesome, but I want to ask it more questions. And then we would put them into a Change Champions group, see how they were using it, try to find people from every portion of the company that could talk not only how they were using it, but how they were using it specifically to their job. So we could turn that into training and advice to move things forward. We did a lot of surveys, understanding what people liked and didn't like about Teams and Slack and Zoom. And that also helped us to understand where we could automate some of this, whether it's through Copilot automation or through Power Apps or Power BI, but really sort of look at that. Where is the biggest pain point? And is that something that Copilot can help to solve? And if so, how many hours a day are spent doing that? And that's where you could figure out that ROI. And that's sort of a really good place to start. But it's going to be different with every company and even different with every job role within a company. So there's definitely some work and surveys and research to be done to be able to get good value for that.
And when you talk about that, Stephen, like Teams Premium, ROI, who to target, I was reminded that I think there's a set of reports in the M365 admin portal for Copilot, and then there's more expansive ones in the Viva suite.
Yeah.
But
right.
There are reports available that will show for your organization who's active in the various M365 workloads like Teams, SharePoint, etc. So you know which groups to target, and you can even measure that adoption in those reports after, right?
Yeah, we do. We do a combination of that where we go, yeah, there were, 72 people last week, or this percentage used Copilot in Outlook to start an email to do this. There were these people that recorded a meeting or looked at the meeting transcription. So it won't tell you the actual people, but it will tell you by OU, global group, security group, or manager, however you have things set up. And being able to track that plus doing surveys is tremendous. We have a survey that after only 1 month, 70% of our users felt comfortable using Teams and now using Copilot. The secret is if you look at an organization, I always use what I call the 70-15 rule. 15% of your users are super advanced. They want the first of everything. And you've got 15% of your users that go, we've always done it this way, and I will never, ever change. And you will drag me out, on my chair till the day I die and never leave. But you have that, 60%, 70% right there in the middle that are like, I like Copilot, but I like Windows 11, but et cetera. And it's trying to figure out what that is, training for that and moving those folks from the, middle ground. I'm open to it, but I'm not sure, to the positive. That drags those folks in that bottom 15% over. And what's interesting is we found 70% now were good. We had about 20% that were like, yeah, I don't know, and 5% that were completely lost. But now we know we need to focus training on that and do some hand-holding to either move those folks up or, whatever that company decides to do. So I think when you look at it that way, that definitely, I think, helps to better visualize the approach you want to take with that.
So, Stephen, I guess I want to sort of dive into sort of a bit more on the adoption side of things. So,
Mhm.
do you like, is there anything, or have you seen like a trend of like common mistakes that users like have, or when they first start using Copilot, and like how can they avoid them? And obviously, the biggest thing with Copilot is prompting. So maybe you can talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that as well.
What's interesting is I've had a lot of customers who have money to bring in a partner, and all that partner has done is come in and turn on Copilot and give them some very basic training. And without, again, that infrastructure being cleaned up and ready to go, they didn't get what was expected. So that's the first thing, is understanding the expectations of your end users. That's, again, where doing surveys and understanding where their pain points are definitely going to help. I think there are 3 or 4 really key things with prompting. And one of the things I love, and this just hit over the past month, is now when you not only can you click prompting and have it send you out to a web page that has all of these prompts that you can read through and get ideas from, but one of the things that we've did at one of our companies is said, hey, you can save your prompts and copy them. And what we would love for you to do is, if you have a good one, we created a team called Tips and Tricks, copy it and paste it inside that team. And every month we'll pick the top prompt. And what we started seeing is people like, hi, I'm in finance. I now use this prompt. And one was like, tell me all my meetings for Monday and Tuesday and app mentions or tasks I had from last week's that aren't done, and do that for me daily, things like that. So people started seeing what other people were doing. And that really helped to open up the eyes of the what if. Could it do this? Could it do that? You do get to a point where you say, I would love to automate this, much the way people said with Teams and Invoices to set up a Power Platform or a Power App to do that. So we're starting to get companies where their developers and even just regular people are looking at drag and drop ideas, especially as they bring in third-party apps, ones that are bringing in Jira, Confluence, Cloud, Salesforce, things like that, where they've created a Copilot connector, which is a way to take the data that's being held in that app's cloud and share it with the graph with your own cloud to be able to create that. They're now creating automated workflows for their salespeople. And let's face it, salespeople are generally the least technical people in the world. So just saying, hi, there's a bunch of buttons and you have to hit this, and it'll tell you what our current sales level is, or what we have in the way of, product or inventory, whatever that is. That really starts to make a difference. And when you explain that's Copilot, then again, you get to that what if phase. And I think that's probably the most important thing is, hey, if it can do this, couldn't it do this, and start down that path?
So do you also feel like I guess from hearing this, like an organizational culture change is helping with that adoption and foster, better experiences?
I think, let me take a step back. There are 4 generations of workers working in the workplace for the first time ever in the history of technology, going from baby boomers to our Gen X, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z. Gen Z checks email twice a day. They are chat-based. They want to be able to work from any device, anywhere, and don't see the difference between a cell phone and a laptop. It's just a way to get to your stuff in the cloud. They were born in the cloud using nothing but a browser. So if you are not going to start to work in ways that support that, you as a company are going to find it very, very hard to retain that great younger talent, which is doing a really good job, working really hard, and for a lot less money than your higher level executives. What I think AI is going to do for companies is get rid of middle management. Those people that take a bunch of stuff from one group and then look at it and hand it to another group, and they're getting paid a lot of money for not doing a lot of work except just being kind of overseers. Those are the roles that are going to start to disappear. But it's important, because if management isn't going to start to chat and put files into Teams and turn their camera on and leverage Copilot and start to use these tools, it's very, very hard to drive usage with the rest of the company when they have to start making exceptions. And I walked away from a deployment with a company because they just were not willing to change and said, we're never going to achieve this, so I'll get you to a safe, secure spot. When you get to that point, let me know, but we can't move any forward with this. And that happens sometimes.
I mean, I think that's a perfect segue into like for organizations that take that approach of like just licensing users and releasing Copilot into the wild.
Yeah.
How do you come in there and kind of like, kind of approach to kind of uncover, the real high value wins for them, or increasing usage, or even just getting like the ROI that they're maybe having some high expectations around, kind of AI and what it can do? Like, how do you come in there and kind of steer the ship back to a place of success?
Yeah, with the company I just finished working with, Blue Modus, what we did was we created a Change Champions program before we rolled anything out, where we said, who are your top experts in IT? And I want one person from every job role to be part of this group that we want to talk to, show art of the possible, understand their questions, survey them, because they represent the workers working below them. And that really gave us a roadmap to not just what success look like for leadership, but for every group. And then they started using it. We realized some groups, we've got to go back to basic teams. Other ones were far more advanced, and they were getting into questions like, how do I connect this with an FTP site or do this with clients? And that really helps you to start to segment out those different roles and where it's at. But these are the people who also report directly to leadership. Then it is, again, surveys are really great, conversation, creating a team for those change champions to list their issues, solving those issues, walking them through it, pre-training help desk, and then bringing in good content, maybe something like Brainstorm or something like that, setting up a really good LMS, learning management system, where they can go through and self-train. People learn differently. Some want guided, want to be guided through how to do something. Some just want to read give me the top things issue. Some want a step-by-step. And providing that training, I did a cheat sheet that like, hey, here's the 20 most common things that are going to help you in your transition from working in Slack to working in Teams. And here's how you do this now in Teams, or here's some cool hidden features. So I think it's things like that, and then getting them to share, creating UGC, their own user-generated content. So it's a series of things, but again, it's getting buy-in, and it really is, I can't stress how important those surveys are in communication with the people that are going to be affected, so they know what to expect, what's going to happen, it's coming from the top, they know what changes, and they feel that they have a way to ask questions and be on board with that. So it is something too where you have to be willing to pause what you're doing and say, we'll move forward with these folks, we'll slow down with these. You really have to kind of watch it as if you're cooking food and constantly adjusting temperatures and speed for things. But the biggest thing, and when I got my MBA, people asked me what I took away from it, and I said two things. You can either do it good, fast, or cheap, but you can't have all three. You can't have more than two. And projects have a start date or an end date. You can't have both. So either you say, hi, if you want it done by this date, this is when we're going to start, or if we're starting here, here's when I think we're going to end. And I think being realistic with that, and that's really my point, becomes really key as a part of that. But it really is that open communication. It's not just we're going to turn this on and tweak some things. I recommend bringing in an expert or a change management expert, a project manager, which I hire to really help keep things on track, and communication, weekly meetings. All of that is pretty critical. And I'm sure you see very much the same things as you're doing software as a service, security, any of those things. It is continually educating and informing throughout that process and getting that feedback.
I totally agree. I think maybe the flip side of that is, how do you tackle that percent of users that are very technical, that have some expectations of what AI can do for them, and then they kind of jump in and maybe it's not aligned, and how do you reset those expectations?
Yeah, it's hard understanding what people are currently using AI for, because what is it? 70% of employees at companies are currently using ChatGPT or some AI tool in some way, shape, or form. So asking, how are you using this? It's also going to probably let you know that 20 to 30% of the stuff they're doing probably should not be done publicly and probably has confidential information or things like that. And you're training LLMs with that. That sort of helps you to get a round on it. And if there is one group that's doing a lot more, You want to encourage them. Great. We're going to give you access to Copilot Studio. We're going to give you these things. We want you to play with it and try to redo some of these things and try to bring it in. So I love encouraging that and then having them create things for other employees while other ones are just trying to wrap their head around what is this going to do and am I going to lose my job, which, tends to be there. So again, it's really sort of adjusting those burners, but introducing folks to that. GitHub, there's a lot of great free or very low cost tools that are fairly easy to use to create those types of workflows and to be able to allow them to automate processes or even create their own. Takeda created their own Copilot. They're using Copilot, but they also created their own called My IABO for HR, that people could go to it and ask questions like, how much time do I get off if my wife has a baby, or how many vacation days do I have left? Because it was more secure and there was PII, they created their own internal one to solve a lot of those issues. And that was really exciting to see how both of these could live in the same environment simultaneously, yet achieve very different goals with different security concerns.
I wanted to ask about a topic about oversharing specifically. I mean, one of the biggest risks, and it's quite interesting to demo this too. We did a demo a while back where we had payroll data exposed in a tenant, and the file name was some innocuous name. And doing a regular search in SharePoint didn't reveal anything. As soon as you asked Copilot to look up payroll data, it found the information and tabled it, looked pretty, showed everybody's payments and what they're getting paid, et cetera. So how, it's a tricky thing to solve for. I'm wondering if you're coming across that and what you might do to help your customers get a handle on that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I say is, look, if people can't, if they find it in Copilot, it was available to them before Copilot. It's not Copilot suddenly unlocking stuff and doing that. So that's really the first thing. And having a good set of policies for OneDrive versus SharePoint Teams, mine and ours, and the difference between sharing and copying and moving, which are three very different dramatic acts. That basic education is incredibly important. There are some good third-party products that you can bring in that will scan SharePoint, OneDrive, all of that, and will help to tell what is shared and not. But really the best thing is labeling in E5. Turning on labels not only helps Copilot to better find information, but it's going to help you to say, look, this has these words in it. This is confidential. It goes way beyond DLP. That plus DLP plus Azure Information Protection become a great tool. If somebody leaves the company, you hit one button, they no longer have access to anything. But labeling and using the labeling functionality in E5 is really going to make that a lot easier, because as soon as it sees a social security number or a dollar number and it's not somebody in sales, it immediately says this is internal only, it's confidential. What's interesting is when you ask Copilot about that, you say, hey, what is this? It will say, hi, I can give you this bit of information, but the rest of it is in a document owned by this person. And much the same way you would if you found it in through a follow, you have to click it and gain access to it. So those are probably two things. Labeling is probably one of the easiest ways, although it does involve an additional cost, or you got to go through it by hand and use some third-party products and look at all the shares, but it's something that needs to be done at some point, and then turning on labeling and doing the rest is going to have to keep you from having to do that on a regular basis. Have you seen something different or have a different thought behind that? Because I'm curious, because I get asked that question quite a bit.
There is one feature that was released,
Please.
I think a couple months ago, just for the SharePoint case. I believe you can specifically exclude a SharePoint site library from Copilot. Right. So if you do have, one HR repository or whatever, it's probably a smart thing to do if it's sensitive information. But I don't know if you guys have any other tips on that.
That was done last April. In the same way you can point SharePoint at a different library to bring something in, you can also say, do not scan and spider this one for search. So yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we're all in agreement.
Yeah, the good thing is there seems to be a lot of awareness about this issue now, and like you say, there are tools and ways to deal with it. So it seems like things are advancing there. So.
Yeah, but it's a long process. And, one of the interesting things with the company who we did that fast migration for was we took a look and they had 2 terabytes and 7 years worth of data in SharePoint. And they had it all in one folder, which is not recommended at all. And we're like, look, first of all, let's break that all out. Anything more than 3 years old and it hasn't been touched in 90 days, let's move it in Azure Cold Storage. They're going to save quite a bit of money, probably $3,000 every single month by moving that old data out of SharePoint, / Teams, and even out of OneDrive and out of Exchange to move it into a place where they can still access it and hang on to it for legal purposes and do that. So that's probably one of the first things which is going to help to reduce it in the amount of data you're looking at. And whether it's some sort of manual process or an app, get rid of that older data. It's not doing you any good. It's not going to help Copilot. And again, if nobody's touched it in the last 90 days, chances are they don't need it. In general, most of us use about 4 to 7% of our files, 80 to 90% of the time. So beyond that, there's a lot of stuff you keep as a cover your ass kind of thing that you will probably never need and most of the time forget you even had. And when you open it up, go, oh my God, I made PowerPoints that looked like this at one point in time. It's absolutely terrifying. But yeah, we all did.
Good stuff. All right. Well, we'll cap it there, Stephen. Super great chat and really, really interesting seeing boots on the ground with Copilot. Of course, Microsoft 365 Copilots everywhere. So really appreciate your insights with the customers you work with. I know you have a blog. You're on LinkedIn. You're on Twitter. So we'll post all that in the follow-up blog. And I want to thank you again for coming on. That was a really great discussion. So thanks a lot.
No, my pleasure. It's always great to see all of you, and thanks for inviting me. And look forward to any questions you or your audience has in the future. And good luck with your Copilot adoption and pilot plan.
Will do. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.